Warning: the following audio may contain coarse language, as well as discussion of material that may not be suitable for younger audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Also, we may spoil just about anything that pops into our heads. We hope you enjoy. Hey there everybody, and welcome to another episode of ZNote-Talku, where we talk about anime. I mean, I don't know what else you were thinking. I mean, this sort of talk is in the title, but anyway, I am ZNote, and joining me is a good friend of mine, a wonderful animator, and a wonderful person to talk about anime with, Aaron.
Wait, who's that again?
That's you.
Oh, I see. Hello.
Yeah.
Hi.
When you said that for a second, I thought that your mic cut out again.
No, no, no. I
Oh, okay.
was I was doing a very well thought out attempt at comedy. Hello, everyone.
Well, I mean, to be fair, that attempt at comedy was vastly better than some of the attempts at comedy that aired in fall 2021. I can say that much. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Irina the Vampire Cosmonaut, or Tsuki to Laita to Nosferatu, for those of you who prefer that title. So I'll at least start with the entire reason why I wanted to watch this show in the first place. Vampires in space. Do I need to say anything else aside from that?
Uh, it's a pretty specific niche, which is also kind of the reason why I watched it. Uh, because anime is such a niche-driven market, right? Like everything, well, because so much with too much anime is made all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and because the market is so like hyper fragmented,
Mm-hmm.
things are marketed at such specific audiences that this is the only mainstream medium where you're going to get an anime about this or an anime about few girls doing a very particular sport or things like that.
Absolutely.
This one this one is special though because it's not just a vampire in space, but it's also a vampire in space with an obsession for Soviet aesthetics.
Yeah, and that was actually something that I was intrigued by, was because when I saw the Japanese title, I thought that it was making allusion to, I think Laika is the name of the dog that the Russians sent into space way back during the space race. If I remember
It
correctly, that's what
is.
the dog
It
is called.
is.
And so I thought to myself, okay, so if they're calling it that, then I really hope they're going full-fledged, like Cold War style aesthetic and propagandistic tone, depending on where they set it. And thankfully, it did not disappoint in that regard, because I'm sorry, it's not the USSR, it's the UZSR.
Very different.
Yeah, very different. Of course it is.
There's actually scenes where they like play something that would be their anthem, and I lost my shit every time that happened.
Yeah. It really does feel like it made an effort to plop you right into the middle of the 1950s and 60s.
It's well, I guess we'll get more into the aesthetic as this goes on, but
Absolutely.
it is funny because the show kind of like tries to capture that like very obviously Soviet aesthetic in having a theme that's practically the anthem,
Hmm.
having the acronym be almost the same, having everything written in Cyrillic. But it also always falls for this thing where when it is time to actually set the date and not the space things are happening on, it'll very much go for like a Western approach to aesthetics. Like it is so full of jazz for some reason.
Especially the jazz
But
bar.
like, well, not,
Yeah.
not, not. It's not just full of jazz because jazz happened in Russia.
Yeah. Yes, it
It's
did.
more. I mean more that it's all in English,
Yeah.
and there is several signs throughout the show, which I guess I'll get more into this later. But there's several signs throughout the show where they do that, making a text in English and then changing the letters for just like the Cyrillic equivalent of the letter.
Yes. They do that. Yes, they do.
Anyway, I think setting the stage a bit and explaining what we actually watch would be a good way to start.
Yeah, so the entire premise of this show is that, like we said, it takes place right in the middle of the space race, especially in its earlier years. The UZSR is trying to beat the United Kingdom to be the first to get a human being into space, and the way that they're doing that is by experimenting and testing not on another human, but on a vampire named Irina. Oh, I'm sorry, like N44 or whatever they call her, because she's not a person. Ooh.
Yes. In this world, vampires are a thing. They live in their own somewhat separate communities, and they are mercilessly taken by the Soviet government as a way of experimenting when they are not being executed. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to mention for context, when Xenon mentioned the United Kingdom,
Hmm.
that's just the fictional name of the entire Western blog. Just for
Yeah.
they just decided that the only way to you know, make it just as evil was to have both evils, United States and Kingdom merged into one.
Which I actually like as an idea, because for whatever reason in another reality I could sort of see like the Soviet Union doing something like that, just taking both the UK and the US and just
I
sort of
don't.
smooshing them together as to one mega mega giant evil capitalist conglomerate.
That is why the two blocks were such a big deal. But I'm not gonna. I'm
Well,
not gonna
yeah.
Western. I'm not gonna Soviet Union fanfic in here. To be honest, that's already in the hands of the show.
Mhm.
Uh,
And so, in order to try and in order to make Irina more receptive, as it were, to the various experiments, and also just preparing her for her eventual test launch, which they make it very clear that after the launch is done, they're basically just going to go right on ahead and kill her, because one, she's a vampire, so why should they live? And also dispose of somebody who could possibly leak government secrets. In order to watch over her, they get Captain Lev Leps, who, which I don't know why, I kind of like that name, just like Lev Leps. It's just I can't even necessarily describe why I like that name so much. It's just like, yeah, that's a name.
it's a very main character name.
It is a very name character
It
name.
is. It is important to note at this moment that this is, after all, I think a light novel adaptation.
I think it is, yes.
And as such, it's not so much just the story of Irina, the vampire girl, like fighting through oppression and going to space, as it is the story of the very nice guy that managed to get Irina to go to space.
Yeah, that
There
is
are
true.
things that change throughout the story that make it not as terrible, but the story is primarily a sort of romantic story, just like set within this frame and in the idea of space travel.
Yeah, Lev is
Always through
yeah,
the eyes of the main character,
yeah,
which is Lev.
yeah. Lev is set up as such a, like you put perfectly, such a nice guy. I mean, we'll get probably a little bit more into this maybe when we can get more in depth into actual episodes. But I mean, he he's not sexist, he's not racist, he's just always trying his gosh darn best, and he just wants everyone to work together to make the best mission possible. And while, I guess I can give you props for, being nice and all that jazz, so to speak. But but the problem is that it kind of makes his character very, I don't want to say white bread, because that's not really what I'm it's not as nuanced as it probably could end up being, as it were. Like, I wish that he actually had a little bit more edge to him.
Mm. Yeah, that'd be interesting. They do talk in the beginning of the show about how he's somewhat scared, and he does say like, I also feared you in the first place, which could have fooled me.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically, in the beginning of the story, Lev, candidate for being the first cosmonaut, gets thrown out of the program for basically violently standing up to a superior, as they
Yeah.
say.
And probably standing up to
Uh,
a superior for doing something that was, like, oh, you can't do that because you don't understand, sort of that
and
very nice guy mojo kind of stuff that you see in
basically,
those really
yeah,
bad Robin Williams movies.
not that he was a bit much of a violent person, more that he was bright and
Yeah.
Soviet Russia bad, so
Yeah.
he suffers. And so they put him in charge of this cute vampire girl, voiced by Megumi Hayashibara.
Which,
Uh,
when you told me that that's who voiced her, I immediately knew I had to watch this even more than I already wanted to. Why would I not want the voice of Rei Ayanami in my anime?
do you mean Lena Inverse? Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, and so the whole thing is structured in these two arcs where it's like her trying to get to space and him trying to get to space. First her through his guidance, and then him kind of on his own, because why would the dynamic be really inverted, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and and before talking more about this story, I have to kind of state why I wanted to watch this so bad, which is not only just the niche aspect of it, because there's a lot of very niche media that is kind of just shit. The show was handled by director Akitoshi Yokoyama with an infinite amount of anime experience.
Yeah, yeah.
And he is also just the main source of memes for the show. Things that people might know him from that I can think about is like animation director work in the Cowboy Bebop movie,
Mm-hmm.
like episode of Gurren Lagann. I think it was 13. I should have opened the Anime News Network page before saying this. I think animation direction on the FMS team. Generally, more of a storyboard slash animation direction person.
Yeah, like
And
just a couple of other things that just in case people are curious. This because I'm actually got his AniList page open right now. He's also done some a little bit of storyboarding work for the 2003 FMA. He's also done it for an episode of Kill La Kill. He's done some animation and directing work for various seasons of Attack on Titan. The guy has a long list of pretty impressive credentials.
and definitely an industry veteran from like the 90s Sunrise slash early 2000s Bones days, which, you know, means that his biggest strengths are in like the type of drawing styles that you would have seen there. And he really wants to showcase that to the storyboard. This is basically a passion project of his, with him being involved in most every episode, at least for one or two important sequences. And with his better episodes storyboarded with actually like a huge deal of care and being like pretty impressive in that sense.
Yeah, that's one thing that
Now,
that's one thing that immediately set this apart from a lot of other niche anime or even some other anime that aired this season is that even maybe in the times where there's a bit of a disconnect between maybe the storyboarding and the actual finished work, you can tell that there was a lot of effort put into trying to make this good and to make this work.
yeah, which is extra funny because when I watched episode 1, there were a lot of shots that had like this extra bit of depth that you used to see in older Sunrise, IG, Bones, Madhouse type movies, where you have a room, instead of shooting it kind of from the front, a la Ozu, you do like a good old 3-point perspective, or you have the characters pop up from different sides with very volumetric faces. The first episode had a great deal of realistic drawings of people from the Soviet-esque government of the show. That was really cool. A problem, and this is going to happen more and more as the show goes on, is that Yokoyama will keep this style of storyboarding despite the show's productive conditions, which were less than ideal.
Yeah.
Less than ideal, meaning that by episode 2, you can already tell that they can't afford a single of the complicated sequences this man sets up. And so one of the things that kept me going through the show, I was watching this with another friend, one of the things that kept us going through the show was just like seeing this man be like, yeah, here we're gonna have like a camera rotating around the two characters and the background while this jazz track plays, and you can see the animators like sweating every time you're watching the scene, if not bleeding.
Oh man, I just imagine what it must have been like to be an animator in the studio, to be given that sense of direction and just have the moment of just sweat immediately, like cartoonish sweat just immediately pouring down the face as you realize what you've been tasked to do. And do it with so little time to get it done.
And yeah, that's fucked up. Anime production is always very complicated. And to be honest, I would say, even though I really like how these guys' boards look when they're actually, made seen through to the end, like properly finished.
Yeah.
I actually don't think it's very clever boarding to just go as hard as you can despite the rest of the production crashing down. It basically hurts the final results because limited animation is there so that these things aren't so obvious.
Yeah, and when the cracks are more notable, it does as a viewer watching, it creates a bit of a dissonance between what you know that it can be versus what you're actually experiencing right in front of you. Like I would rather have it be smooth, even if it's not the best, as opposed to occasionally having these flashes of brilliance, but the rest sort of feeling like it's a car that's struggling to get down the road.
There's a scene. I think we have to get here now. So the first arc is moving, and the main character and Lev and Irina are slowly opening up to each other as they communicate to each other their dreams and what they want to do in space. So they go to this frozen lake.
Oh god!
This is what I have to say. The show has pretty strong aesthetics in some departments. I actually like the character designs when they are drawn according to model. And
That's the key, according to model.
like the first episode have really neat drawings, and the background design is usually pretty good when the signs actually are in Russian.
Mhm.
So the 3D integration is better than other, but never mind that. I get that for TV is a bit fucked anyway.
Yeah.
But so they've opened up to each other. At this point, they're at a lake, they're talking, and they're like, we're gonna do ice skating.
Hmm.
And that ice skating sequence for which Yokoyama, descended to the episode personally and storyboarded the whole part,
Hmm.
uh, is this sequence of almost Shaft-esque camera rotations that move as the character is moving, the camera is also moving, it's rotating around them, zooming in, zooming out, but never just through like a digital camera move, always fully animated.
Yeah.
And seeing the absolute struggle was physically painful because that
Yeah.
sequence should have been beautiful by all
Mhm.
measures. It is overly male gazy. It is very
Yes.
it is very objectifying of Irina, so that's not a good start. It wouldn't have been my favorite sequence anyway.
Hmm.
But it clearly wanted to convey this sense of like being liberating for the
Yeah.
one night where it happens for the character that is actually skating. But it just ends up looking like this very poorly drawn, very poorly animated collection of almost, I wouldn't call them pinups, but it is this. It has a weird vibe to it. It's a bit creepy, especially because Lev isn't really skating. He's just looking from the bench, and that's part of the perspective we'll get.
Yeah, because that's the problem is that if they were excuse me, if they were skating together, first of all, there's already a massive problem hanging over the scene because of, like you just said, the demands that the scene is requesting are so extreme. But if Lev had been skating with her, it, like you said, would have cut down on the male gazing aspect because it could have kept them both more in focus. But also the fact with all of like the camera spinning and also just the fact that you see Irina from just about every angle imaginable, or at least that it's trying to manage, also with some poses that, while they look really cool on some level, are also kind of like all right. It really does seem like it's the scene that sort of
Yeah.
sadly cements her as it's the scene that cements her as when the show is at its weakest, when it's treating her more as a as a romantic idolized object as opposed to being a character who just doesn't take anybody's shit.
Exactly. Look at this character bathed under the moonlight. It's extra bad because this episode we've also been introduced to like the very embarrassing style of drinking scene that Moe anime will do,
Oh
where that
no,
character will do
yeah.
so much as try a liquor-filled bonbon and like die.
Yeah, because I wanted to like that whole sequence because they're at a jazz bar. It's a perfect
Yeah.
atmosphere for them to actually sort of break away from the rigmarole of constantly training and exercising. But we have to sort of fall back onto the comedic trope of, oh, you tried
Yeah.
like one glass of alcohol or one glass of sake, and all of a sudden you literally don't know your right from your left.
Uh, yeah, that's also the scene where she reveals that actually she was lying about being an adult and she was 17 because we can't have nice things.
It's like,
And if there's that, let's just not go too much into that because all terrible anime does that. But there's that. The episode in general was used, and this is not to criticize it anymore, just like as a comment, to set up all of the symbols that the show is going to use later. When the drama and the tension start, increasing, to
yeah.
have something to fall back on, the foods that they like, the activities that they like. It's that kind of
Yeah.
like, it's a very obvious setup.
Yeah, it doesn't also help that they make her liking soda water be a complete tsundere trait, which is it's soda water, okay? This is not something that is worth making. This is not worth something that is worth creating a tsundere trait out of. It's water.
It's just like this very transparent attempt at having the very one specific symbol to hold on to.
Yeah.
And they make as much of a good use of it later as they can. Actually, to go more positive, we've already shit on the visuals a good amount.
Yeah.
And we've already shit on what this episode does. The show actually starts getting better afterwards.
Yes, it does.
With Irina slowly taking more of a main character role compared to Lev.
Mm-hmm.
As her struggles, her fears, and her anxieties slowly take over and become like one of the central points of the plot.
Yeah, well, that was one of my favorite moments where she wakes up from that dream of like the aircraft exploding with her in it, and then and then she basically or not with her. Yeah, it has her dying just like the test dog at the rocket crash site or whatever the hell it was that they saw in the previous episode. It's like
Yes.
all right, so they've set up a situation and they are now actively impacting the character's psychology in a sensible manner. I mean, because even though one of Irina's traits, especially early on, is that she doesn't care if she gets disposed of, she just really wants to go to the moon.
Yeah.
I love the fact that they added nuance to the fact that actually that whole veneer that she was carrying is not actually nearly as true as she made it out to be. So you set up a perfect situation of an accident that she witnessed and saw the after effects of, and now it's impacting her ability to train. It's impacting her ability to focus, and I love that they did that.
Yeah. What's funny about that is like the duality of the show is portrayed in that scene.
Hmm.
Because when she starts having those anxieties, she does it in a shower scene, if you remember correctly.
Yeah.
And every time they reuse that scene, they actually skip the shot that I'm about to mention. But the first shot is this horrible POV shot from above,
Hmm.
a high angle, just looking at her face sinking in the water, and it's terrible. The show can't decide if it wants us to look at Irina as the actual dog or if we should feel bad for that.
Yeah.
It's like it is caught in the very anime dichotomy of the camera is telling me that I should be like treating this character as like a fan service object, while the plot is telling me that this character is really fucking tired of that happening to her.
Cinema narrative dissonance is such a bitch. The world's finest assassin gets reincarnated in another world as an aristocrat. Had this same problem in episode 4 when Lug is making sure that Tart's body is molding into the assassin physique that he wants and she wants.
I'll take your word for it because I'm not gonna be caught dead watching that.
I did watch the show, yes.
But yeah, what was I saying?
Did not,
There's
yeah,
that
not, yeah.
dissonance, but the show does get better, and eventually Irina kind of becomes the main character, with Lev taking more of an absent mentor kind of role and just like appearing
Yeah,
basically to advance the plot, while Irina is the one actually taking on the emotional burden.
yeah, and
Which,
it's funny you mention absent mentor because he actually is absent from Irina for a period of the show, and I love
yeah,
the fact that he wasn't there.
yeah, I wish he'd been more absent, but he is absent. At this point, the plot becomes about basically Irina being scared for this guy's eventual trip to space
Yeah.
and her own disposal and many other things. Well,
Hmm.
and him being scared for her disposal and his own trip to space. So it's like they are a bit more apart, but they're suffering from somewhat the same reasons.
Hmm.
And the plot keeps going in that direction without much of a progress. At this point, we have established that there's kind of a romance, but they're going to be tsundere about it because physicality in anime is a myth.
Yeah, because
Uh,
as much as it may be my favorite anime ever, thank you, Clanad, for completely destroying the anime community with that.
uh, there's actually the biting scene I forgot to mention,
Oh yeah, the biting scene, and I think what is it, episode
but
5 or 6?
6 or 7, I think. But yeah, 5 or 6 actually. Yeah, but in
Yeah,
any case, basically,
it's episode 6. I just remembered. Yeah.
Lev gets really horny after being bitten and really wants to get bitten again, which I wholeheartedly respect.
Yeah, I mean, I
Uh,
love the fact that it plays into the whole idea of vampires as a
yeah,
cultural symbol for some kind of sexual taboo or some kind of forbidden sexual like either
yeah.
mindset or act, and I
I
love the fact that they played into that. I just kind of wish that it had focused more in a way on the weirdness of that and not Lev being just so damn nice.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing, because as the show goes on and we get more into the mentality of Irina, the only growing pain the show has, besides its horrid production, is that Lev is just too nice. He like solves every problem by just being nice, and people are like, "God, man, you're really nice."
Yeah, like with
It's like,
the
yeah, I actually don't care about gender, and the woman that has been like mistreated for that whole thing is like, you know what,
oh
you're
yeah,
right.
the White Rose of Sangrad, I think is what they call her or something like that.
Yes,
like,
indeed.
and yeah,
And it's like also she kind of forgets about the fact that Lev, even though he has grown closer to Irina over time, has been an active like perpetuator of her oppression too. Like he has put her through like those near-death experiments.
Mhm. But it's okay because he cured sexism, remember?
Yeah, anyway, after curing sexism, the show is not done yet. He
No,
goes on
it's
his last trip
not.
to space.
It's not done.
The show goes on its last trip to space. So Lev gets kind of like, moved aside, and now it's time for Irina to be like, Lev, are you okay? Where are you? And just suffer.
Mhm.
Uh, as she doesn't know if Lev is going to be chosen, she doesn't know if Lev is going to return, and
Mhm.
she doesn't know if Lev is going to talk to her ever again because after the trip, Lev becomes a national hero,
Yes, he
and
does.
his entire existence becomes a tool of propaganda.
Which I
He
like.
now belongs to the state, and as such, all of his speeches and everything have to relate directly to how nice the Soviet Union or the show's version of it is.
I love
There is,
I love the, it's a little touch, but I love the fact that it's got all of those crumpled up pieces of paper on the floor, and then you also
yeah,
hear at one point the dialogue saying, it's not complimentary enough, rewrite it. It's just like
yeah,
it's a little world building touch like that really cements just how much they really do try to make the UZSR seem like the kind of propagandistic hellhole that we associate that we at least in the
see,
West associate the Soviet Union as.
that's the thing. I was gonna say one of the things I liked in the beginning of the show is that even though it presented it as a fundamentally broken system, people making their lives in it were just making their lives in it.
Hmm.
People simultaneously had an individuality and a dependence on the system, and I actually liked the nuance with which it was treated. People could have fun there still.
Yeah.
And I feel like as the show goes into its like final moments, it becomes more and more of a cartoon.
Yeah.
Like the innocent like goes from another broken system into like the actual huge evil that it looks like, and it's taken to such an extreme where sometimes I'd be like, I
Hmm.
get it,
Yeah.
stop. But that's good. That's good because it actually does something really nice at that point, which is one of my favorite moments. The one moment in the series where I feel like they all understood what they were actually writing.
Is it the moment where she runs out into the sunlight?
Yes, it is that.
Oh, that's such a
Uh,
that moment was I. I'm sort of hesitant to say it because it's going to sound like a bit of exaggeration or hyperbole, but that moment made the previous 10 episodes worth the wait. That was such a brilliant
yeah.
sequence, both thematically and visually and just even acoustically. It worked
Yeah.
on every front.
I don't think I could go that hard, but it's definitely like the stronger sequence in the later half by a long shot.
Hmm.
Basically, in the first half, they set up this like symbolic system where they just talk about food and eventually use that food during Irina's first space travel
Hmm.
sequence
Yeah.
to communicate in code so that the UK I can't so that the UK doesn't understand
Hmm.
what's happening and can't get any important information from it. And in this second sequence, Lev, now in space, decides, you know what? It really sucks that people didn't get to hear Irina. This is really unfair. She was the first cosmonaut.
Oh,
I am not.
yeah.
And so he just replicates her original opinions of space,
Hmm. And
supposedly as sort of a thank you and as legitimizing her ideas type of way.
she's pissed.
And, you know, the show is really good in that sense because while everyone is celebrating him as a national hero for saying that, and he feels like he's celebrating Irina as a national hero for saying that,
Hmm.
Irina is like, why the fuck are those my words? I am never going to, like, no one's going to relate those words to me. You've just stolen them.
Hmm.
Because what seems to be giving a voice to the oppressed through relaying their message
Hmm.
is actually just stealing it from them because you're not letting Irina actually speak.
Yeah, as long
And
as
Irina
yeah.
is pissed,
Oh no, go ahead.
and she is pissed, and it's such a good sequence, and then they don't do anything with it.
Yeah, well, that's the problem is that if it had helped build to some other kind of confrontational catharsis, then it would have succeeded a lot better. And the problem is that they were kind of hinting at something, even if not directly that, something more just inherently antagonistic between the two of them in the last episode, which then gets rectified in the gigantic speech from the Kremlin. I'm sorry, not the Kremlin. The main building. There we go. When he's recounting his rehearsed speech, and then he name drops Irina, who snuck there along with the nurse who's been watching over her.
And it's like, oh yeah, by the way, I wasn't the first cosmonaut in space.
Yeah.
It was Irina, and she's really cool because she's she's tough and she likes soda water and she likes going to jazz bars.
Okay, this is this is the part where I'm gonna go a bit hard.
Yeah. No, go
we
ahead.
haven't mentioned this. We haven't mentioned this up until now, but Irina has another companion, which is a doctor girl, who's like this pink-haired child.
Yeah, Anya the doctor.
Anya the doctor. This is a very light novel move. In general, the way we're talking about this and the way we described the show's actual characterization of the Soviet Union makes it seem like it'd go for a somewhat realistic-ish style, but that's not true. It just like kind of doesn't make an effort to make the more light novel aspects and realistic aspects coexist. So whenever they actually clash, it feels really weird.
Yeah.
So this doctor basically decides that, she's tired of being nice and it's time to go apeshit. And so she takes Irina and starts just, they start making their way through the guards and getting to the speech.
Yeah, which does include Anya's one of my favorite moments involving her, which does not involve when she and Irina are in the town or at the lake again.
Yeah, do you know that?
Is when like she does the flying headbutt right into the guard's
Yeah, do you know
stomach.
like that one move from like Street Fighter where M. Bison can just like throw himself
Yeah.
back and pressing forward?
I'm so glad that you mentioned that because I was gonna mention that, but it also shows that I'm not alone. So thank you for that.
So after that move, Irina gets to where Lev is. Lev solves racism during that speech.
Oh god.
Just by being like, we really shouldn't discriminate vampires, guys. And everyone is like, no, we actually should. But the government...
the government is like, actually...
The government decides that soft power is actually not soft, and you can in fact apply it in one afternoon if you want. And so they go, no, you know what? Fuck it. The Soviet Union is not a progressive country, and vampires should be treated as equals. In fact, people like the UK who do discrimination against them start. And that's like the only shot we get of the United Kingdom in this series of like this random blonde dude just like slamming his desk.
Yes! I love that moment, but not in the manner that I think the show was trying to make me love it.
At this point, after all the good faith episode 11 had made me grow, it just kind of drops it. At this point, I'm entirely lost. Lev has solved racism, and with Irina now, the government decides to spare Irina. I kind of had wanted this to end in the final episode as a light novel series in like a tragedy or something. That would have been sick.
Yeah, like if they had both been like taken out to the gulag or something, and shot or something, I actually think that would have been. Granted, it would have been a lot darker and a lot more miserable, but
but it would have made for such a like neat little bow, like at the end, like cherry on top. But anyway, that's it for the story, I think. Unless you have something else, basically, it just ends in the most optimistic way a light novel could possibly end.
Yeah, like I imagine a future where everybody can live together in space, and I think it. Like cuts to shots of humans and vampires interacting, and I think having human-vampire hybrid kids or something.
No, not even.
Oh,
it just kind of cuts to like different people all over the world hearing the speech, and it's like people and vampires, and so that means it's been solved.
Yeah. I guess then as far as the story is concerned, the only other thing that might possibly be worth commenting on is actually the episodes or sequences where it's just Anya and Irina. Either just hanging around the town in that one episode, or when they're also on the lake. Because I actually think that those did a much better job of making Irina's character nicer, but without without making her just basically a romantic tool for Lev. Even though her feelings for Lev do come up in conversation, which also kind of makes sense because the three of them have spent so much time together. So it also feels like a natural conversation. At least they talk about
their culture and traditions and stuff. Like there is, Irina really comes into her own when Lev is not always on the scene. Like the moment she gets a moment to talk, she actually becomes the more interesting character in the series.
Definitely. And let's see. What was the? You got something?
We forgot. Best Boy.
Yeah.
Heart Attack Man. There's this guy. This guy who is like the unsung hero of the series.
Yeah.
Much like Lev, he actually doesn't really actively discriminate Irina. He participates passively in the oppression like Lev does, but he doesn't do anything worse than he does.
Yeah.
But doesn't get any praise for it. He sets up the space flights and like prepares everything so that they won't die because he cares about them. And he every scene he's in, he'll go like, "Argh!" like and
Yeah.
chest because he's like apparently going to die, but then nothing happens to him.
Yeah, and speaking of nothing happening, despite the possibility of it, if you remember, I think it's at the end of episode 6 because that's when the bite happens. It then cuts to that one shot of Lev, like looking at his arm, and then he screams like "ah!" or something like that.
I think that was meant to be a complex character acting moment, telling us that Lev was very frustrated with not seeing her again and remembering her through the bite. But probably the trashy production schedule meant that this is all they could get away with, but it was too late to change the board. Yeah. And the result is just Lev being like, I'm about to become a vampire,
exactly.
but not really.
And okay, I mean, humans turning into vampires, that's an old trope associated with the mythology. Like,
that's what's funny about it.
Well, yeah, that's what's funny about it. So the fact that they have this sequence where it seems like they're hinting at that, and to the point where he's even like screaming it, and then nothing develops, I thought was really funny.
Yeah, it was. And on that same note, I want to go back to the somewhat end of the series and bring back the production thing I mentioned in the beginning.
Please do.
By the last episode in the series, there were scenes where I actually didn't recognize a couple of characters for the first 2 seconds they were on screen. I don't think anyone looks the same for 2 shots in a row during the last episode. Lev's face?
Yes, Lev's face. Like, what happened to the texture on his face? What happened to the texture on his face?
His eyes are very close or very separated. He doesn't really adequate to perspective at all. Yeah, There's one scene in the last episode where they actually bring back the chief animation director, and you can tell. Mm-hmm. It lasts for like 4 shots, and it's beautiful. And it reminded me that the drawings could be good. Yeah. The rest of the episode didn't. It actually also, halfway through the show, starts going way harder on photo bashing. Mm. Except not really, because photo bashing implies some kind of treatment of the photo. By the last episode, they just like have the anime background and random pictures of crowds, just like cut and pasted on top without any care, except somewhat blurred so that they don't look like the cut photo they are.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
No, it really doesn't. And like we said before, it's unfortunate because it has these flashes of such good animation and moments, but they're sort of muddled by by just the fact that it's sort of crushed under the weight of its own storyboard ambition.
Yeah, so it's like the storyboard is like the show's best and the show's worst at the same time. Mm-hmm. And there's also this thing that I thought was funny. What was? Yeah, the planet Earth. During Irina's first trip to space in episode 6, it seems like they hadn't gotten the final model of planet Earth they were going to use.
It does kind of look a little bit...
So it is like this... It is like this, LOD PS2 model of planet Earth. And then when Lev goes to space, then it now looks good.
Yeah. Which, I mean, this is obviously not in any way how it's intended to be interpreted, but you could interpret it as the idea of,
I was thinking about that.
Yeah, it's like, we're not going to make the Earth look good for arguably the most, like, the character's, like, Irina's climactic moment as a character, but we're going to do it for Lev. It's like, God,
this is actually the narrative stroke of genius. Let me explain, because you need to really hack you to understand Irina. Actually, when Irina sees the Earth from outside, it just is reflecting her condition as an unsung cosmonaut. So it's like she's not really seeing Earth, right?
Get the fuck off my internet.
She's just getting the Kid Glove version of Earth. And then Lev, the real hero.
You know what the sad thing is? I know you're trolling me, and it still makes me so angry.
But yeah, production not good, and I think we could just kind of summarize the show very quickly. To be honest, even though it's an emotional roller coaster of a show to go through, just like on a meta level, its problems and its strongest points really are very simple.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason why maybe we haven't gotten nearly as dissecty as we possibly could, is because, like you said, the show itself and the problems and its strengths are all so simplistic that it's kind of, it's very much an as you see it kind of show in that regard. And in a way, I guess you could argue that that's a strength of it, because you could argue that it is just, turn your brain off, be entertained by this light novel adaptation story. But at the same time, when you know about the about the director behind it, then you think to yourself, like, really? Like, I understand, like you said, this was most likely a passion project, and I guess maybe one of the disappointments that I have with Irina is the fact that it was a passion project, but for being a passion project, it's so simple.
Yeah, I mean, passion projects are all about what the author wants to do. And this year, we have already seen that artistic freedom and artistic intent are mercilessly crushed by anime's production pipeline.
Yeah, that's
Sometimes wonderfully,
Yeah.
because anime doesn't know how to prioritize good shows.
No, because we need our 500th isekai of the year.
But yeah, basically the show as a narrative, if you want to look at it as the self-contained thing, the story itself, which for the record, you should probably never do if you can avoid it.
Yeah.
It's very simple. The story doesn't work because it doesn't have the technical capabilities to pull through, and it's pulling in a lot of very random moments from the light novel without much tonal consistency. The most interesting thing, I think, to glean from the show is the actual way in which the historical fetish the author has, and this like space obsession, this very clear like classic Hollywood narrative ambition full of like that romantic jazz and scenes staring at the moonlight.
Yeah.
Intertwined with the otaku sensibilities that it needed to be sold as a light novel.
Yeah.
How jazz bars Vesda and Irina, or Irinian, according to the scientists, can't coexist in the same thing. It was very complex treatment of Irina as simultaneously an object and a character might be the most interesting thing about it, and they never intended to talk about it in that context.
Yeah, it's very, in that sense, the most fascinating parts about it are purely accidental. Which, I know that they say that sometimes, good art is created by accident, or, just sometimes as a flash in the pan inspiration as opposed to being methodically planned out. But I really don't think that was what they were going for here.
Yeah, I mean, they do talk about objectifying Irina as a subject. But there is this whole irony that always happens because there's a lot of light novel plots that are just like the magical girlfriend plot where the girl is powerful but trapped and the guy is kind of the key to unlocking her. In which, through freeing her of the oppression the novel states in the beginning, and her becoming a component of, or I guess a narrative to the main character's life, she's supposed to have been freed, but at the same time there is this, outside of the narrative itself, she has become more of an object because her having been freed from whatever that thing was means that the camera is now going to more freely treat her as an object, and there's always this conflict between the two, right? Like you see it in Darling in the Franxx. You see it in even legit good shows like Spice and Wolf, where the camera doesn't really even know how to treat this character that in the book is perpetually described as the most beautiful thing, which means that the visual language should communicate something like that, but at the same time you're supposed to see her as more than that.
Yeah, it's for a lot of productions that either don't have the resource manpower to actually physically get it done, or the directorial manpower to actually be able to strike that balance perfectly. You end up getting this very weird like seesawing effect where it's either like very much of one thing or very much the other thing, and it so rarely levels off in the transitions between the two.
Yeah, it can't afford subtlety either.
Yeah. I mean, then again, it is a story about vampires in space, so in that regard, you could argue, well, why would you want to be subtle in a story like that? But at the same time, I mean,
But at the same time, why would you want to solve racism in a story about vampires in space? That's kind of the problem.
Yeah,
it's trying to have it both ways, which is inherently a very anime problem. 86 is a very good series that also is trying to simultaneously cover all of those light novel bases while telling an important story.
Yeah, and I say that even with the full admission. I say that even with the full admission that I love 86.
Oh, I do too, but it is that type of young adult narrative in which the medium and the message are kind of fighting each other. But there is ways and ways to do it, and it is clear that the ability to have a good presentation, things like a good schedule, which 86 ended up not having, but it had us fooled in the first season.
Oh, yeah.
A good presentation is kind of what can bridge the gap between the narrative inconsistencies.
Mm-hmm.
And Irina just didn't really make the cut.
No, it didn't really make the cut. And as far as 86's second season is concerned, I mean, it is true that A1 has botched that completely. And while I would still argue that the episodes that have been really affected by the delays still are fine, they don't seem to have the same kind of attention to balancing its themes like 86's first season or the first few episodes of the second season did. I mean, if there's any lesson to take away from a show like Irina or from 86, it's that if your production is in line, then even if your show isn't necessarily blowing everybody out of the water, it will at the very least be able to carry itself a lot more steadily than most other things.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Which is a shame because, I mean, even though I like the series, I can't really, even though I like Irina, I can't really recommend that people watch it. But
I mean, actually, I'm gonna go the other route.
oh, you're gonna
Even
go the
though
other
I
route?
don't like Irina that much, in the end, I would recommend that people give it a look just to see a very unique and a very authorial somehow version of these anime problems taking place.
Yeah, like
It's not a terrible series.
yeah, because on any list, if we were going with the smiley system, mine would be a smile, but one of the more lower tier smiles, as it were.
Yeah, I do use the smiley system, and I have given this a meh face, but an app description saying that it is, in fact, an interesting show above everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of want to use this as an excuse because ZNote has made the mistake of bringing me on here. Like, watching these types of shows, it's always good to not assume they are turn your brain off series. You can always glean something from them.
Yeah,
I would
absolutely.
recommend anyone who cares enough about anime to watch these videos talking about specific series to actually look up literature and history of anime and find where all of these somewhat weird things come from, because discussion now is a poisoned well.
Yeah. Now this is actually part of the reason why I did want you on here. So while you call it a mistake, I call it planned. Because I know that you have actually read a lot more about anime and animation just in general. Are there a couple of resources, regardless of language? Because I know that I think you're a natural speaker of Spanish, even though your English is also far more articulate than a lot of people I know. Uh, is there any literature on anime or animation that you would recommend to people who do want to dip their toe into that?
I mean, there's obviously a lot. As with most things, a lot of it is not available in English or Spanish, sadly enough.
Oh.
But a couple like interesting things, depending on what topic you want to go for, are always in order. Like if you want to learn about anime as a collection of technique and meaning in a bit more of a complex theory type way, even though the book is kind of like the starter one for that, The Anime Machine by Thomas Lamarre is very good.
Mm-hmm.
It does have a good amount of citation, so it is definitely a much easier read if you're already just have dipped your toes in academia a bit, but it is readable.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would recommend for people who care about things like Irina, about things like idol shows, and about things like Clannad, Era Canon, is this book by Patrick Galbraith called the Moe Manifesto. It is a collection of interviews with different creators and critics from all over Japan.
Is this the one where you pulled the Maeda quote from that one time?
Yes, it is the one with the Maeda quote.
Okay.
It's a collection of interviews, and it's interesting because it is talking about Moe as a phenomenon, which does not refer to just, Moe as haha cute Sikeyon character, but as a phenomenon related to being affectionate for fictional characters, and explains a lot of the dynamics and interplay behind the way people relate to this type of otaku-oriented media. And I think it would really help clear a few of the misconceptions that people have. I feel like it's important to read those things that also involve, like, eroge creators and stuff, talking about the mechanisms before creating behind their works.
Mm-hmm.
So that people can use the right words for things, use the appropriate words.
Mm-hmm.
I would also recommend just like checking the staff of every anime you look just Googling the names and seeing if there's something you're interested in.
Yeah, especially considering if if you've sort of noticed the same name inadvertently coming up on your favorites list or something like that, it just naturally gives you more things by them that you would want to explore. Like, for instance, I only just, as you know, because I think you and I have only started actually chatting in earnest for the past few months or so.
Indeed.
Yeah. When we weren't all as a part of that one giant general thing in Discord, is that I've been doing that more and more, and I've been finding that when I zero in on shows that I like, it's usually because there's some either recurring figure or some kind of recurring person who I just end up finding myself gravitating towards whatever it is that they've worked on. And that's even starting to translate to voice actors and actresses, which is why when you told me that Rei Ayanami's voice actress was in this, I felt compelled to see it.
It just makes anime viewing a much more pleasant experience when you actually kind of like know what you're watching. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people that say it kind of takes the magic out of it, like, oh, now that I know that this is that the guy that plays Dio, Takehito Koyasu, is always typecast, I always hear him instead of the character.
Mm.
It kind of stops happening after a bit. So there's that. There's just like brushing up a bit on anime history. It is cool to watch old shows.
Yes, it is. It is very cool to watch old shows.
Uh,
In fact, it's thanks to you and your pressing that I watched the show that is your icon right there, Ruko.
yeah, Girls Last Tour.
Girls
Not
Last.
exactly an old show, but it's definitely good.
No, it's not an old. Yeah, and I realized as soon as I was saying this, wait, no, that's not an old show. It's only a few years old by now. But no, yeah, anybody listening, watch Girls Last Tour. Please do. It's very good.
Yeah, it is. And you know, in general, I think you can glean also a lot more from new shows if you know a bit more of the context.
Mhm.
Uh, and there's nowhere in particular what I want to take this. This is just kind of ended up being an excuse for me to rant a bit about how I don't really like how anime discussion happens. But yeah, that's it.
So then, so I guess in that case, then anime reviews online must make you
Oh
very
yeah,
happy.
yeah, you can say that. I don't really follow AniTube anymore, to be honest.
Yeah, I really don't either.
But if I were to recommend someone to people, here's where I do a shameless plug.
Oh, please, no, go ahead.
For someone who actually doesn't even know me. Uh, for people who care about anime in context more than they care about plot, characters, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Looking up channels like, for example, Boss and Select
Mm-hmm.
is a better idea to like learn about how to actually approach anime from a perspective that's a bit above like, the otaku just replicating what they read in a review. I am sorry, I really don't mean to be insulting. I just suck at controlling my own tone.
I put the disclaimer at the beginning. You can be as insulting as you want.
Yeah. But in order to like not parrot the very, very, very ill-informed points that you see online about all anime, it is always good to look for those more primary sources or for people who actually can check and cite them. Citing things is not an academic thing. It is intellectual honesty.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, it is worth remarking that one, not only have you been watching anime for years and years and years and years, you're also no slouch when it comes to actually animation work in general either.
I'm actually not very good at Western animation, like encyclopedically, especially.
Mhm.
But yeah, I do animation for a living.
Yeah. In fact, if you actually go to his Twitter, which I will, if you go to Aaron's Twitter, which I will link in the video's description, you will see some of his work featured in One Piece episode 1004. So, needless to say, Aaron knows what he's talking about with a lot of things.
With others, I don't. Don't be fooled by my tone.
No, I mean you've known me long enough to know that if I think you're full of bullshit, I'm gonna call you out on it.
It's a good thing.
Yeah. So I guess with that said, is there anything else that you can think of that you wanted to talk about as far as Irina is concerned, or something else, or do you want to wrap it up?
No, not much more, except if you like the opening for the show, please consider watching other shows with Ali Project songs, like Hack Roots, the best show ever made, not really, but yes, really, or another.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's funny. I watched Another years ago, and I really do need to rewatch it just because it's one of those shows where the community has sort of made it into a running gag, and it's like, you know what? Maybe I need to see
It's
this again just because it's been too many years.
it's such a good show, and it's such a misunderstood show too.
Well, who knows? Maybe I'll draw a similar conclusion after I see it.
but we will find out.
Either that or you're going to get a very angry DM from me.
Hey, what the fuck was this?
But yeah, so for those of you listening, if you want to follow Aaron, I will link his Twitter in the video's description. And I guess the last thing that I want to ask you before you go is, we've already mentioned Girls Last Tour, and you've already mentioned Dot Hack Roots and another. Maybe one or two other anime that you think more people should see, just in general?
I mean, I can't just make a whole ass recommendation list
Well, yeah.
in a moment, but if you want, you can always watch good anime like Kunihiko Ikuhara anime. You can watch the good old classics that you can find anywhere that everyone's going to recommend, so I don't need to do it. And my personal obsession as of late has been this writer named Kazunori Ito, who was behind the writing in the original Ghost in the Shell movies, both the 1995 one and Innocence. And in his TV work is basically the main writer of the Hack series. And of the little-known anime Zettai Shounen, which I desperately need more people to watch because it's very good.
I remember you mentioned in a post somewhere, like, why are more people not talking about Zettai Shounen?
It is like the weird child of Ghost Hound and Yokohama Shopping Log, and I don't know why no one has watched it. Or like, people have watched it, but I don't know where they are.
Yeah, and also watch Yokohama Shopping Log, anybody listening. That's a beautiful 2-episode OVA.
Yeah. But yeah, this writer is very interesting because his style is a lot less bombastic than most anime writers. He's like one of the very few people I've seen write anxious or depressed characters in a way where they don't unanxious or undepressed to make the narrative advance faster. They are the only series where a character not being able to say a line exactly how they want it will actually delay the plot for 3 episodes, and I love it.
So, if nothing else, your mantra for the past month has been watch Zettai Shounen. It was either that or what was the other one that you were watching recently, Sakura Wars?
No, Sakura Wars is not really a mantra at all. It's just like a fun idea of a show that is fun to go back to and see who made it. But the Zettai Shounen, interesting show.
So noted. All right. Then I suppose any final thoughts?
No, I don't think. Actually.
Well, all right. In that case, for everybody who took the time out of their day to listen to this, thank you very much. And on behalf of Aaron, I have been ZNote of ZNote-Taku, wishing you all happy viewing, everyone.
Goodbye, y'all.